So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Sustaining a Seed Library, Borrowing Procedures, and Community Donations. We're glad to have you with us. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes to help everything run smoothly. If everyone could please keep your microphone muted during the presentation to avoid any interruptions. We kindly ask that you remain respectful to our presenter and fellow attendees throughout the session. Also, a recording of today's webinar, along with the presentation slides, will be shared with all registered attendees afterward. And now it is my pleasure. I'm going to turn things over to Margaret Woodruff, Director of the Charlotte Library in Vermont, and a valued member of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative Advisory Board, who will introduce today's speaker.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is such an exciting event for me to be part of, and I'm looking forward to learning more from Rebecca. As you may all know, if you've read the description, she was the co-founder of the Richmond Seed Lending Library and has sort of launched the Seed Library as something that can take place in libraries of all kinds, all across the country, and has really kind of set the standard for how we can do that. And she's going to share some of that with us today. I could say a lot more, but I'm going to hand it over to her so we can all start learning. Thanks for joining us, Rebecca.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll go a little bit over, obviously a little bit of an introduction. I'm also a middle school science teacher. So besides having the Richmond Grove Seed Lending Library and the public library, so I'm not a public librarian, we have a nonprofit inside the public library. My sixth graders started a seed library, so I also work with a school seed library as well. And then this kind of all led me to, with all the work and kind of interest in seed libraries, creating the Seed Library Network. So we'll talk about, a lot of this is about what the resources are that are available, because there's so much out there that I just wanted to kind of unpack what's available to people in terms of what are some suggestions around borrowing. There's no one size fits all. So it's really about looking at your community needs, your staffing or volunteer resources, and seeing what works best for you. And also knowing that it can change and grow over time to meet your needs. So that's something to really know, that there's, what you're doing now might just be a starting point, and that might change over time as your capacity increases or decreases. It can go either way. I mean, we're a 100% volunteer organization. So I really set it up from that standpoint that I worked literally 120% as a teacher and ran two nonprofits. So I needed to have something that worked for my busy schedule. And so, but you might have staffing available to do some of these projects for you. So a little bit about the class. So we're going to just kind of go over what might be some setting up and borrowing procedures, what kind of guidelines might you want to put in place, what are some of the kind of parameters that support one decision over another, signage and patronage education. So what might be some things that support people borrowing seeds, and then also what procedure do you have in place for people to return seeds? And then obviously one of the things that most seed libraries will express is that there is it's easy to get the seeds out. It's a little bit harder to get some back. And so how do we increase donations? How do we increase local seed donations? And then when those local seed donations come in, how can we look at those and determine if that's something we want to include in the collection or not, or if it just needs some additional labeling so that people are clear about what they're getting when they do borrow those seeds. So we're going to kind of unpack that. So once again, if you're coming in, this is all recorded. You're going to get a copy of the slideshow. So it's going to kind of tell you where to go to get the resources. So once again, there's a lot of resources that we've created. Everything that we've created in the Seed Library Network is open source in the public domain. So you can take anything. You don't need to do attributions to us. I mean, obviously it's nice so that other people can find us, but it is completely not an expectation of using any of our resources. And if we have time, we'll do a little Q&A at the end. But we also do have a forum that I'll talk about at the end called Upbeat. And so if you have questions, you are more than welcome. And we'd love people to kind of add questions or resources that they have to the community so that people can kind of collectively support you. And then we all benefit from those conversations. So a little bit about establishing borrowing guidelines. So a lot of people, a lot of libraries want to kind of balance access with availability. And so you kind of have to decide where you're at. Like we have a really large collection. It's 100% locally grown, but that's because, I grow a lot of stuff. I have a seed garden at my school. We have connections with some other seed libraries that actually have land. So we actually have we have 3 large cabinets. So our need to really kind of limit isn't really there. But that might not be the case for if you're just starting out. I mean, I go to a lot of, we have just in the 2 counties that where I live and right next to us, we have 55 seed libraries. So there's a huge demand and interest, but the seeds go flying off the shelf. And so a lot of times people go in and like that's fairly bare. And so, some of them are thinking about, do we want to put on limits on terms of how much people borrow so that they can extend it to serve more people? And so for some communities, some of the ways that they do that is they pre-pack, which means they're putting in certain amounts of seeds in each envelope. And so people are getting a certain amount of seeds. And so that kind of guarantees that this amount of seeds is going to serve this many people. That's really nice because you actually can actually put on the packets what you want people to see. You put the correct amount of seeds in or an appropriate amount of seeds to take. It can build community because people are coming together and packing those seeds together, or you can send them home with people to pack. But obviously that requires a much bigger time commitment. We in Richmond Grows have not done that way because I just knew that, we based our model off of the one in the Berkeley Ecology Center. That was the first one, Basil. And they were always a self-serve model, and it went kind of in and out of like really robust to kind of being more fallow. And so we decided to kind of go with that model of just self-serve, which is a lot less effort. We eventually moved to jars because we had a mice infestation one year. I mean, it was in the library in general, but it was just like, so we have everything in jars. But because people self-serve, sometimes they take larger quantities. One of the things we started working on is like educating people about how much do you take. And this is also a sign. So once again, in this presentation, which is going to be shared with you afterwards, you're going to get this, the PDF of this, and it's going to tell you where to find the signs. So for example, this is one sign that we made recently about quantities. So take only what you plan on growing this season. Take 2 to 3 seeds for larger seeds. If you wanted to grow 2 zucchini plants, you don't need a whole packet of zucchinis. That's ridiculous. That's a way to have your neighbors hate you or love you, depending. And then, a pinch for smaller seeds. So just having this sign out in our library helps people understand how much to take. And once again, this is also a great sign you could include in seed swaps as well. And this is downloadable on our signage page on our website. Establishing borrowing procedures. So I think a lot of libraries are pretty good at establishing how to check out seeds. As I said, having the suggested amount of seeds to take out is great. There was a man, so we do have a process on our website, which is an Airtable, and I'll talk about this a couple times, where people can share resources that they've created so that collectively we're gathering this information. And one of the resources we came across on one of the Airtables was a man who created this auto seed wrapper. It's a Google spreadsheet, but I'm sure it could just be done in Excel as well. And we worked with it to kind of add some extra information in, but it has, you can see on here, it has the name. We put it in Spanish as well because we have a large Spanish population, the variety name, the scientific name, the year it was grown, how much to take, or if the people were pre-packing it, that would be how much they would put in, notes about that particular variety, planting instructions, and then seed saving instructions, who it was grown by, and then a picture of it. So this is a resource that you can download as well. We have it set up. Oh my gosh, it's amazing, where it has the species name, the common name, the species name, the growing instructions, and the seed saving instructions. And all you need to do is put the year, the variety name, and the description, and you can use it year after year. And you just need to change, now it's 2025. And I'm going to print out these labels again, and they can be put on Avery label self-stick. We just put them on paper and cut them up and stick them in a jar. So this is a great way to kind of make sure that when people take seeds, they know how much seeds to take, and they have all the information that they need from the seed envelope that they would get from a commercial packet. And you can use it year after year. And so this is available on our envelope and label page. As I said, some seed libraries want to limit, and once again, sometimes that's done per household per month, per season, per year, and you kind of have to decide for yourself based on your community and the need and how much seeds you have, what makes sense. Some of this is done as an honor system with just a sign. Some of it requires you going to like a reference desk and checking out. And then there's obviously even some seed libraries that where you can do it via the library card. So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of do that piece. So in terms of signage, when we recently did a census, so if you haven't got yourself on the seed library map, we have a census that you can add your open seed library to and find, and it also helps you find other seed libraries in your area or in your bioregion. And when I was redoing the website this year, I was looking at different pictures because I was looking for cabinets and things like that. And one of the things that I really noticed was people were great about borrowing procedures. They had lots of signage on their cabinets about borrowing, but the labeling and education piece wasn't kind of was a little bit more, you know, scattered. So there's maybe a couple of brochures about seed saving, but not, you know, not a whole lot out there in terms of what was visible to the public facing side when people were borrowing seeds. So that kind of return piece wasn't happening as much, maybe because there wasn't that visual piece about borrowing, yes, but returning not so much. So we do have, once again, like a sign about envelopes as well. So if people are taking seeds out and they're self-labeling as opposed to being pre-packed, these, and even if you are the person who's pre-packing, these are things that are kind of minimum requirements. So I would say minimum requirements, whether you're self-packing or having people if you're pre-packing or self-serve, you want to have the common name, a variety. If you don't have a variety information, a description, and the year it was grown. And the reason why we want to have the year it was grown is because seeds have different lifespans. And so if someone doesn't have success with a seed, you want to know, it's helpful to know, oh, this is because the seed was older, or oh, the seed is new. Maybe this had something more to do with watering or some other share on the gardener's side. And also the grower's name. So it's helpful to know the grower's name. Sometimes, especially with seeds that are self-pollinated, if you don't know the grower, you know, you're probably going to mark certain things diverse because you don't know if they are cross-pollinated or not. And once again, this envelope requirement sign that's just 8.5 by 11 is on our downloadable checkout page. Okay. And then another thing is about donating. Like, how are you going to educate people about donating? So once again, I said people are great about, like, they might say borrow. They might have signs. I've seen lots of signs which is like borrow, plant, you know, return, but what does that return look like? How do you do that? What is the process in terms of me getting the seeds from my garden to the library in a condition that the library wants? Do these need to be cleaned? Do they need to be packed? If I return them, do they need to be labeled in a particular way? And so that part, I think, of the process of seed libraries needs a little bit more kind of polishing. And this is just the picture I just wanted to show of the Richmond Grows Seed Library. So we have this sign here, you know, all seeds need to be clean and dry and clean. Seeds were saved from heirloom, open pollinated, or landrace. Seeds were saved from heirloom, open pollinated, which means they come out like the parent, or landrace mixes. So these are mixes that are intentional, that might be historic mixes that are found in a community that don't come out just like all identical, but we're not saving from commercial hybrids. And the reason we don't save from commercial hybrids for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, they don't come out true to type, so that's kind of a given. But one of the other things is that a number of the small seeded commercial hybrids can also have male sterility as one of the unintentional consequences that we might introduce sterility into the seeds that we're bringing. So we don't we don't accept for us, we don't accept seeds from hybrids that were saved from somebody. And then anything that is labeled as GMO, which really isn't really in the seed libraries, it's not really, it's more of a commercial thing. GMOs aren't really in gardens. And PVP is plant variety protection. And just to know, Johnny's selected seed has a lot of really great seeds, but you do want to look if you're purchasing from Johnny's, if it is under plant variety protection. So just note that if you're purchasing seeds to look for that. And then we always say from healthy plants, save from as many plants as you can, and then labels are filled in completely. And so once again, what are the minimum requirements and then what are nice things to have? And then for us, we say people, when you want to return, because we're 100% kind of honor system self-serve, and we're not there at the library because we're just a nonprofit inside the library. We just have a yellow box and then people put the seeds in there and then we go through them and make sure, oh, well, they're this year. And it's like, we have the person's name. If we need to, we can look them up and say, well, what year was this actually grown? And then we also use this guide here, the seed return. This is on the seed returns page, which helps us identify if this seed is likely to come out as the person labeled it. So for example, we've had people donate seeds from Trader Joe's pumpkins. Well, if it's Trader Joe's pumpkins, it's probably going to be some type of pumpkin, but it's probably in this category of very likely diverse. So we would probably not keep that. But if someone gave us a fava bean, it's going to be a fava bean. But unless we know that they didn't grow more than one fava bean, it could be possibly diverse. So we're going to label those seeds as possibly diverse. They say it's this, but it might come out slightly different. Whereas common beans, peas, sweet peas, lettuce, tomatoes, those are going to come out as labeled. So it just helps us vet our collection. And I'll talk a little bit, I'll revisit this sign a little bit later as well. And once again, if you're coming in a little bit later, all of this, you're going to get a copy of this PDF with the links to this. So you don't need to be taking notes. You will get this in a moment or in several days, however long. So procedures for seed returns, like why do we want to have procedures in place for seed returns? One, obviously, if we clearly communicate with our patrons why we want to do this, it's going to be more sustainable financially. So we're not going to be purchasing seeds or having to spend a lot of time trying to gather seeds from local nurseries that are donating to us. And we know that when we're getting locally grown seeds, these are varieties that work well in our area. And so I can't speak to your area, but I live in a really cool coastal California community where I can't grow big tomatoes. I can only grow things that are like Siberian tomatoes and really small tomatoes. And so for me, it's, if I know that it was grown locally, I know that it works in my foggy climate. And then it also creates community. So it's really lovely to be able to share things that were saved in the community. And you have this connection with, it's not just a sunflower, but it was the sunflower that Alberto shared with us. And it was like, there's a picture of his beautiful children running through the sunflower patch. And so it's kind of like wonderful to share things that were grown by our neighbors. And we see those pictures of them and kind of, it's not just a sunflower, it has a story behind it. And then as we're saving and sharing our locally grown seeds, we're adapting things to, our specific climate, the cool coastal California, global weirding as things get kind of unpredictable, we're having things that are responding to those changes in our community. And then we're preserving culturally diverse and relevant varieties. And then obviously it's just fun. So all those reasons of why we want to do it, to communicate those with our members about why it's important, if they save it, to think about, can they possibly save some and return it for other members to borrow. And then once again, part of that process is the education piece. So providing instructions, as I said, on the auto seed wrapper, which I mentioned earlier, you can download envelopes, provide them to people so they know exactly what they're getting, how to plant it, how to save the seeds. So as they're getting the seeds, they have the seed saving instructions right there on the packet. Providing brochures on seed saving. We have a few on the seedlibrarynetwork.org website on seed returns. Once again, on the bottom of most of our pages on our website, we have a thing called an Airtable. So we have like a community resource center. And so you can either add to the resources so people can see the brochures that you have made so that other people don't have to start from zero, or you can look at what other people have uploaded so that you can kind of, so it's either add to it or you can also look at what people are doing. So it's kind of we've got both kind of pieces to kind of increase our resources so that other communities can benefit. And then also seed saving posters. So one of the things that we worked on this past year, I had some lovely volunteers from UC Berkeley, and we were working on these kind of 8.5 by 11 or A4, depending on what country you live in. These just little one pagers about how to save tomatoes, and we have these in Spanish and French and Portuguese. So these are all going to be in multiple languages, depending on the needs of your community. We also have another piece of increasing seed returns is to offer classes on seed saving. So we do have a teach a class. And so there's going to be two different versions. Well, there's one right now, which is seed saving in community that's available. And once again, everything that we have is open source, public domain. All of the pictures on the class are taken by me or by another seed librarian, Julia Dakin from Going to Seed. So you don't have to worry about having any concerns about copyright infringements if you use any of our resources. And so we're going to have the seed saving community class that's available that you can take. And then we have another one that's just going to be like a seed saving. And once again, all of this is just take it. You can use it as it is. You can tweak it. You can totally make it your own, but it's not having to start from zero. And it just is a nice way to kind of get your program up and running. I know the first year when I did the seed library, it was a lot to just get it started. And I was just like, I'm just going to try to teach one class. But to even put that together was a lot. So just know that your first year, you might be like, I'm just getting the word out that we exist. And maybe next year I'll add in a little bit of programming. And we're really working and hoping. I'm going to be speaking at the National Master Gardener State Coordinators meeting in December, really hoping that we can figure out how to get the Master Gardeners, because I know many of them are interested in seed saving, but there's not a lot of training for them. So hence, if they know that there's some resources out there. The one that we are offering was vetted as for our, because we're a nonprofit and we're also a project of a Master Gardener, because many of the people in our Richmond Grows community were Master Gardeners. So we got our class approved as a Master Gardener class, but I think that's very individual county by county, but just know that it is approved, at least in one county, to be taught as a Master Gardener continuing education class. Okay, so increasing donations. So I know some people are concerned or have expressed concerns about accepting seeds because they've heard about legal challenges. So in 2014, what happened was, so basically when I started Richmond Grows, I started collecting. I really wanted to create our local seed library as a replicable model that any community could use. And so I started with that intention of creating it as something that could be like replicated in any community. And it went really quickly, where all of a sudden within very little bit of time, there were 12 seed libraries. And then there were like 50 seed libraries within like the matter of a year. And so I started collecting a list of seed libraries around the country and around the world that were starting to open seed libraries. And that was in 2000, May 2010 that we opened. And in 2014, I got an email from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, who had been issued a letter from their Department of Agriculture saying that according to his interpretation, it was their seed control officer, according to their interpretation, that they were considered a seed distributor and needed to abide by commercial law. So whatever. The long and short of it was we pulled together a large community of people to support us in addressing this concern. We met with the American Association of Seed Control Officers and industry representatives from the seed industry for about a year and a half, 2 years, and we crafted a amendment to the recommended universal state seed law, Russell. And so basically what it says is that seed libraries are exempt from commercial regulations. So when they understood that we weren't sharing 100 pounds of lettuce seed, but maybe 200 lettuce seeds, that they realized the scale of what we were doing and that it was local versus, going cross state boundaries, that the concern really kind of was like, oh, okay, this is not what we thought it was. And so the understanding of what we were doing and the importance of what we were doing was understood, and we were able to change the the state seed law and the recommendations, and also pass laws in about 5 states explicitly saying that seed libraries are exempt from any type of commercial regulation. If you are interested in learning more about that process or what happened, the selk.org is the nonprofit seed, the nonprofit law organization that we worked with. And they have a whole web page based on seed law resources. So it's not really an issue anymore. The thing that I would recommend and that we talked about in this whole process was the importance of explaining to people that, we're not up to commercial standards because we're not commercial. One thing that you need to know, and this is the boundary where you don't want to cross, is that it's important to say that people aren't required to return seeds. So when you require people to return seeds, you get into a contractual agreement that you need to return the seeds, and that puts you in a contract. So if you just encourage them, it's totally legal and fine. If you start to require, then it gets you into a little bit more of a gray area. So we have on Enrichment Grows, and this seed is downloadable from signage, which is just saying that, many of these seeds are grown by community members with love and care like ancestors have done for thousands of years. Please know that they may not meet state germination or labeling standards. We do not knowingly accept, chemically treated PVC, PVP, or genetically modified seeds, and that we're doing the best we can to basically provide high quality seeds that feed our community like has been done for thousands of years. So we just have a sign up like that, and we encourage others to also use this language or kind of adapt it to meet your own needs. But it's just helpful for people to know that this isn't necessarily commercial seeds. And, someone might say butternut squash, and it might come out a little bit off typed. Okay, so how do you go about encouraging seeds? So as I said, it's really nice to have the borrowing piece, and like we do accept donations, here's some signage about how to, or here's some classes about how to save seeds. However, there's some other things you can put in place that kind of pull people together around that. And it's super highly variable, just so you know. So we have a thing that, as many of you as librarians know about the one book, one community thing. So it's like you all read a book together and it kind of pulls the community around a particular conversation. And so one of the seed librarians, Salo, years ago, she's from Silicon Valley, Grows Seed Library, came up with this idea of one seed, one community. And can we together as a community pick something that's interesting and that we can all grow together? And so she created this program that we have available on our website, seedlibrarynetwork.org, on the One Seed, One Community page. We have webinars that we've done on it. We have all of the handouts you need on it. I mean, you pretty much need to provide the seed, but the rest of the information is available for you. And what it is you get people to sign up and you pick one particular variety. We tend to like to do beans because beans are pretty and you can pick something that's gorgeous. And when people open them up, they're just like wowed by, a purple fava bean or like a speckled, painted pony bean. And it's really satisfying to shell beans. And, it's a way to kind of, and then you walk people through the process. So we have a series of 5 emails released for the beans about, here's a good time to plant them. And, oh, what's going on now in the garden? And maybe send some photos to us, or, to put them on Instagram yourself and tag us at One Seed, One Community. And so it's a way to kind of bring the community together and walk them through from seed to seed. And what's been really nice about this process is, it creates, we usually pick a seed that's super easy to save. So it's going to come out true to type. And then what some communities have done at the end is they've had a celebration, like a harvest celebration, which is something many of our communities have lost that tradition over the years, but they came together and they did a potluck and people brought their beans. One thing to note though about beans, if you haven't saved beans or peas before, is there is a bug called a bean weevil that can get in them. And it has happened to me, to my One Seed, One Community collection, and I know it happened in Pima County as well to their bean collection, is someone brought in a bean weevil and they didn't know it and they didn't freeze the bean. So if you ever save bean or pea seeds, you want to freeze them for 3 days, not in the fridge, but in the freezer. You're gonna freeze your beans and peas for 3 days and then take them out, let them come back to room temperature without opening, because if you open the container up, moisture gets in, and then moisture is a big killer of seeds. So what happened to me was I went to go do this really amazing great Aunt Rosie's Italian pole bean, the one that's here on the right. And I went to open up the jar and it was just shells of beans, and all the beans had been eaten except for 3. And it was like a half a gallon. They were gone. And that's when I found out what bean weevils were. So it is a real thing. But it's an easy solve, which is you just freeze them. But once again, if you want to get people engaged in a one seed, one community, it's a great way to go. If you are in Michigan, I know the Michigan Seed Library Association or network, the Michigan Seed Library Network, they often do a state, one community. And so they've actually branched out and picked some harder seeds to save. But it's also a nice way to get the genetic diversity when you have a lot of different people growing it. You've got a much larger gene pool to kind of keep the variety maintained properly. Another way that you can also encourage donations is to specifically ask for things to be grown out. So instead of everyone growing one thing, this year, we did a local bean grow out. So we have 2 interesting East Bay. East Bay is the area I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we have great Aunt Rosie's Italian pole beans, which is grown by one of my neighbors on his block, and great Aunt Rosie is his wife's great aunt. And so it's been grown on my block for 40 years, in our community for several generations. And then Louis Nicoli is a guy from the neighboring town who was really big in the Italian American community. And so it's just like there's a story behind it, and these beans are super delicious. They're really well adapted to our area. And so we're just saying we would really like people to grow these out. They're special to our community. If you can eat some, but we also want you to save some and either share it with a friend or share it with the local seed library, and just getting people to realize that seed saving, we want them to encourage that as part of their seed saving practice. So we did a local bean, and then we also are working with more of these land race mixes. So these are more genetically diverse mixes. As I mentioned earlier, we are working with goingtoseed.org, which does a lot of genetic adaptation gardening. And so if you're interested in learning about plants that are adapting to a changing climate, if you go to goingtoseed.org, they have a free class on adaptation gardening. And so we got some of their Maxima squash. And so we were also asking people to grow out Maxima squash. So it's genetically diverse. We're letting it promiscuously pollinate. So we're not worried about it mixing with other Maxima squashes. In fact, if you have a Maxima squash that you like, we're saying please grow them together and introduce that into the mix. So that's another way to get people to donate, is to ask specifically, we're looking for these things to be magnified in our collection. And one thing to note, I think I say it on the next slide. Oh no, maybe I say. Well, one thing to note is that once you get someone to save seeds, they're on board. I don't know what it is, but it's like a light switch. It's like you turn it on and you turn it off, and it's like they're in. Like all of a sudden, like I'm a seed saver. Like I have saved seeds, and once someone has saved seeds for you, they will keep coming back to you year after year, sometimes with bags of seeds. And you're like, woohoo. So I mean it's like you got to get them on board. So those are just 2 methods in which to kind of invite that and support people in moving along that process. Let's see. Okay, vetting donated seeds. So you have to decide what you want to accept and what you're not interested in accepting. So are you going to accept everything? And what this includes, if you're getting commercial donations, you might accept everything. We in our collection, we're open pollinated and land race mixes. So we do these mixes, diverse mixes, but we don't do commercial mixes because, as I mentioned earlier, some of those commercial mixes, the small seeded ones, have cytoplasmic male sterility. And so we don't want to introduce that and put that out in the community. And then it really is going to depend on what you accept in terms of your mission and goals. Are you really focused on feeding people? So we have a mission, and our library is really around, like when we first started, our mission was really around how can we protect our biodiversity, which we knew is extremely, we're kind of in this pinch in terms of we've lost so much genetic diversity in the last 100 years, that how can we find unusual varieties? So we were doing like really intentional, like, can we find unusual varieties, grow them, magnify them, and then put them in the collection so that they were available, as opposed to putting something rare in the collection and then losing it. We do also have seeds, like stamps for our envelopes that say rare. So when we have something that is unusual, that we're really encouraging people. So if we have like a whole collection of bean seeds, and some of them, we have a smaller amount of them and they're unusual, we also have a little like stamp that we can put on the envelope that says rare, please save. And so hoping that if people have a decision between two different beans and they're not, planning on saving them, that they might go for the one that's more common than one that's less common that we'd like them to save. And as I said, we were really interested on preserving genetic diversity while increasing food security. And so those were kind of our like two pieces. And now we're also looking at how can we do all of that in the mix of adapting to a changing climate. And so for us, we do a lot. We accept a lot of things, but it's really around labeling. And so I'll talk about what that labeling might look like. But we don't really, like I said, we're a 100% local collection at this point. So we don't really accept many commercial packets. I mean, we have a couple of them in there every now and then from people, but it's not really where we focus on. But that might be where you are, because you're like just starting off and you're getting donations and it's just about getting the food out. But in terms of what do you get back, if you want to be getting local seed, what does that look like? And it also really depends on like where you're located. So for example, we're in a city, but we have a little bit of growing space. So it's not, San Francisco, where there's a lot less restriction, a lot more restriction in terms of space to grow. But for us, it's really hard to grow some things out, at the level of like professional, what would be, population sizes or isolation distances. So when you're saving seeds, you want to be thinking about the quantity of plants you're growing, so that you have a larger genetic diversity, and then also maybe one type of plant. For example, one corn plant needs to be separated from a different variety of corn by a certain amount of distance. Well, that's really hard to do in an urban setting, because where I live, a lot of people, we've got a lot of Latino families, and a lot of them grow corn. So trying to isolate corn just doesn't happen in our community. And so we'll accept people that save corn, but we're just going to make sure that we label it as diverse, because it probably is. And then just knowing if there are any, and this is not, from most communities don't really have an issue with people saving and sharing invasive plants. But there might be someone who's new to your area. That's, for example, I think about, I mean, there's nothing in my area that anyone would grow that's really invasive. Maybe I would say fennel would be the one thing that we would be a little bit concerned about, because there's, fennel just magnifies where we live. So fennel's a little bit on the invasive side where I live. But it might be, so if you just know what those are, for example, in the Southwest, morning glory. So just if someone offers them, maybe you decide not to put those in the collection. And speaking of the Southwest, this is an intake form. So you want to think about, do you want to have a specific way that when people are donating seeds, that they tell you what they did? As I said in the previous one, let's go back a couple slides. So here we have this one from Richmond. So we just say how we want the slides, the seeds that we want them dry and cleaned, and only heirlooms or open pollinated or land races, and what information should be on the packet. So that's what we have here. But a lot of seed libraries do have more of a intake form. And so this might be a thing that you want to look at to see, what are you looking at in terms of the information you'd like to collect from people when they return. So they're looking here at, did you attempt to isolate or prevent cross-pollination? What methods did you use? And once again, we're kind of just looking at, the list of, is it likely to have crossed or not? So we just kind of look more at this document here of embracing diversity, and kind of If it's in this category, it's probably fine. If it's in this category or this category, we tend to mark it as diverse unless we know the grower and what they did. So you can kind of decide what works for you. We are going for the it's just cleaner when we just say it's diverse, but we accept it. Whereas they're doing a much more thorough intake. And they also have a really tough climate to grow in too. So that's helpful for them to maybe get that extra information. And as I said, we do have on our website, and once again, people coming in late, you are going to get the slideshow. So it's going to have a list of where all this information, all these resources are. But we do have an Airtable, once again, that form where you can add, if you have a seed return or seed donation form that you'd like to share, you can add it to the list, or you can see what other people have added to kind of inspire you as you create your own resources. And then here we have this, it's also when you get seeds donated, it's good to just do a quick visual. Does it look dry? Is it free from bugs? Once again, if it's peas or beans, it's really good to have it frozen for 3 days to kill any weevils. So you might want to take it home or put it in a jar. So at least if it does have anything, it's not going to infect anything else in your container, in your collection. And then germination testing. So if you're getting seeds that are donated, or from companies or whatever, you may not know how much of that is going to germinate. A lot of seed libraries don't have the time or staff to do germination testing, or the quantities are so small that you wouldn't even bother. For most of the part, I would say most of the seeds that go into seed library, the seeds fly off the shelf so quickly that you don't need to worry about them. We tend to, in our library, as I said, we have jars, and on the top of the jar is the name and the variety, and then we also have the year. So we can see, oh, this is 2020. Oh, well, this seed is good for 7 years, so it's still okay. Or, oh, this seed needs to be taken out of the collection. And then we can decide at that point, do we want to do a germ test on it or not, based on how much is in there in our capacity. So sometimes we do germ testing. It's easier for me because I'm a teacher and like kids like to do stuff like that. But we do have on our obtaining seeds page this seed viability chart. And so you can see, and this is a nice thing to either post in your seed library, or at least do as you are getting seeds donated, to kind of check, oh, arugula is good for 5 years. Oh, this packet is 3 years old. It's still going to be probably fine. Okay, and then true to type or mix. So once again, true to type means that when you plant it, it's going to come out like the parent plant, so it's going to have the same characteristics, or some things might have gotten mixed. And so at first, I was with the Richmond Grow Seed Library, I was very much a purist in the sense that I made sure I was hand pollinating everything. I was like, if something came in that I was not sure about, I like just tossed it. We're getting a little bit more open to diversity. We're looking more at, adapting to changing climate. And so we're more open to that mix. And as I said, it's hard for some things for us to grow, for example, kale and collard. So I just looked at this and just like things that we can't really isolate corn where we live because a lot of people grow it. So we'll accept it, but we just mark it as diverse. Things like broccoli and kale, same thing. Someone might be growing broccoli or kale or collard, but it's insect pollinated. We can't really determine whether it's going to come out like the variety that they say it is. So we will accept it, but we'll just mark it as diverse. And then there are some plants that people might donate that are locally grown that need to be hand pollinated, like anything that's a squash, a melon, or a cucumber. They might donate a butternut squash, Wall-time butternut squash, but if they didn't really hand pollinate or hand pollinate correctly, it might come out different. And so unless you know the grower and that they really know how to hand pollinate some of those melons, cucumbers, and a squash, you might still accept it, but just mark it as diverse on the packet. We're going to get a little stamp. So it's just like clear, like diverse, or, diverse mix on it. And so we do have, as I said, we have that embrace diversity poster to help you determine what to maybe mark as diverse. We also, on our seed swap page, we have a seed sharing guideline that kind of helps guide you through that process of looking at something and going like, should I accept it or not? And also, if you ever do a seed swap, those resources on our seed swap page are really fabulous. The only thing that we don't accept is zucchini. and summer squashes. And so the only things that I would say as a seed librarian to be mindful of local seed is anything that's a C pepo. Um, because if someone happened to grow ornamental gourds, which is like not all that likely that people grow them, but just ornamental gourds have a very bitter gene that can get someone sick if it cross pollinates. So unless you, and then also if someone grew zucchini and summer and like spaghetti squash, that's the same species. And that's kind of a weird mix. So it would be edible, but it'd be just kind of like what happens when you get a zucchini and a spaghetti squash. I don't know. It's kind of a bit odd. So we tend not to accept zucchini, summer squash, and spaghetti squash um, as a general rule from local growers, unless like for example, I grow zucchini at my school garden because I know it's isolated and I know what I'm doing. But I grow genetically diverse mix, so it's like going to come out like any one of summer squash or zucchini. And this year I'm growing spaghetti squash, so I switch out one year this, one year there. So I'm growing out the seeds, but in a way that I know is going to be fine. But that's the only thing that I would not accept from a local grower. And then just kind of some final thoughts before we do have a little bit of time for questions. Yay. So just signage matters. I'm a middle school teacher, and I think we all know that like repeated exposure helps. So saying the same thing over again and having the message this way, having it on Instagram, having a little poster that says, here's how to save tomato seeds. Oh, speaking of tomato seeds, strongly recommend, we do have a part of our website under special projects on tomato tasting. So if you're thinking about, if you're growing tomatoes and you want to get people to save tomato seeds as well as know what works well in your area, we do have a resource on how to do a tomato tasting. So probably for us, it's going to be like Augusty. So you'd have to decide what works for you in terms of that. And then basically people bring tomatoes, we'll have like a tasting center and then also jars so that like some goes in the jar with the label. And so we have that all there. And then we also have the little like scoring guides as well. And then we'll have like a ton of tomato seeds to be able to share from things that work well in our community. So once again, repeated messaging helps. And then once someone returns seeds, as I said, they're on board. So you just need to get people over that first step, whether you do a one seed, one community project or do a specific ask. Also know, like, are there specific places in your community that you can ask? So we have some urban ag places. We have like a really lovely group, Urban Adama, that's like a community seed, a community garden place that grows food for the community, and they're setting a little set aside for seed saving to share those seeds back to the community. So is there a community college by you that has a garden? Is there some other place that you could ask to grow out some seeds for you? So think about that if you're when you're trying to grow out your collection. And then share your best practices on the Airtables that we have, really like everything that we have. Like basically I created some resources and then people like added to them, made them like spectacular, shared them back, and then we keep pinging them out to the universe and then people add to them and then we keep improving the resources that we have. So it really is a community effort to make these resources available. So many of the pages at the bottom, you'll see this community tips and resources. So that's what other people have shared. Some of them don't have a lot of information on it. So we'd love you to go to the next side, which is add your resources so that we can all benefit from what you are doing. And as I said, all of our resources are open source, public domain. So feel free to take anything, use it. You do not need to credit us. And then my last piece before I open up for questions and then is once again, the resources that we have are at seedlibrarynetwork.org. If you have an open seed library and you have not already got yourself on the map, we'd love you to get to the seed library, go to the see the map, add your seed library to the map. And then you can also hit the explore the map button and see if there's any seed libraries in your area. We do have an extra one, which is Seed Library Network. So it's really exciting to see a number of library networks forming. Michigan, I said, has one. Rhode Island has one that's specifically around natives. So there are a number of little kind of hubs that are creating. We are going to have about 10 minutes to answer some questions, but if you have additional questions that come up later, or you want to share some of your resources specifically with the community, if you go to seedlibrarynetwork.org, you will see the Upbeat forum link. And so you can join our forum. Make sure when you do subscribe, that you you do the confirmation email, and then you can post questions to the forum. And that's just basically, we have like, 1,000 or so other seed librarians on that forum where you can ask questions for or share inspiration. And then we also have a Cool Beans newsletter that is also linked on our Seed Library Network, but it's basically seedlibrarynetwork.substack.com. So it comes out monthly. We might change that a little bit. We're not sure. I'm meeting with the editor tomorrow for the first time. I've known her for 2 years and I'm excited to finally meet her. And then we're also on Instagram at Seed Libraries and on LinkedIn and Seed Library Network. So that is that. And then, Alex, were there any questions that you want to pop to the surface?
Yes. So first from Caroline, how do I edit our seed library entry on the seed library map?
You have to email me. Yes. It is sadly, it is a very manual process. So if you go to hello@seedlibrarynetwork.org, let me know and be really specific because there's like 1,000+ entries, so like where you are, like your county, your state and your city, that really helps me find you to fix it. So that's hello@seedlibrarynetwork.org. Yeah.
Can we access the donation form to use for our libraries?
The donation form, if they're referring to, wait, no, that's not donation. I don't know if they're looking for this one. These are visibly available at the seed returns thing, but this one is not. This one is specific to Richmond Grows because it says put it in the yellow box, but like they could basically type it and take it and make it their own. And like same thing with this one from, this is not, this is a PDF from Pima County. So that's what I'm saying. That's why it's really important that when people do make things, if they could share it, especially in a format that would be someone could take and like make a copy and do it, that would be great. Those are super helpful things, but at least there's a structure that can get people started. Yeah.
Let's see. Is the Seed Library Network having a summit in February?
No. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, we haven't done one for 2 years, but that was because we became a nonprofit finally after 14 years, and we did the census, which took a ton of time, and I remade the website, and I was working 120% and remodeled my house in the last year. So maybe I don't know. I'm gonna probably we're thinking about doing something smaller, maybe just like a 3-hour piece, because before it was 35 different tracks going on, and it was all on different people's Zoom accounts. It was crazy making, but fun. So we might do a smaller, like 3-hour, everyone's in one room type piece. So thank you for the inspiration. I'll find a time, but probably, I don't know. February kind of works. I'm a teacher. I got a break in there. I'll let you know.
Let's see. A short-term seed storage question.
Yes.
Is it okay to leave seed out overnight if it gets humid/warm in the building in the summer overnight? Like last night, it had a high humidity of 61%.
A great question. So they say, oh, and I want to say one thing about the conferencing before I answer that. So also all of our resources for the previous conferences, like every single conference that we've had online, the 2 we've had online, every single one of those lectures was recorded and the PowerPoints are available, and those are all on our website. And they're also, just if you go to YouTube to Seed Libraries, they're on there as well. And so typically when you go to save like seeds in terms of storage, like it's like, I kind of think about it as like a speed limit 100. And so the combination of temperature and humidity should be like under 100. So like you want the speed limit of under 100. So if it's like 65% humidity, then like 35, and I think that would be Fahrenheit. Um, but yeah, so I think if it's like for just a short amount of time, it's probably not going to be like the end of them. But if it was like long term, if you did it for an extended period of time where you were in a really, humidity is tends to be worse than heat is the main thing. Yeah. So we often have like, so for example, I have like an outdoor seed library at my house. And so when it's really like I know it's going to rain, I will tend to pull my seeds in. And then I also will tend to put in like little desiccant packets in there. So that's something if you're thinking about like storing it, and you do have a lot of high humidity in your area, sometimes just having little desiccant packets is a nice thing to add in there.
I think that is all the questions we have in the chat. Anybody else want to drop something in there? Feel free. A lot of great comments there. Thanking you, Rebecca, for the information and the wonderful webinar.
I'll talk a little bit about some of the other resources because I was like trying to
Yeah.
but I wanted to say that I mentioned a little bit earlier is if you were doing a seed swap, I'm really excited about the seed swap resources that we created this past year. Some of them you saw here, which is like the Embrace Diversity. We have also, I'll see if I can find it in here. I kind of like tucked it in. We have here on this front slide here. So we also have all these table signs that people can use, which says, by family. So you can see from a distance, here's the onion family, chives, garlic, leek, onion. And then also it tells you if they're on that table that they're possibly diverse, because if someone grew two things that were the same species but different varieties, they may not come out exactly as described on the package from people. So I would say that's a really great resource to look at. It's got so our seed swap resources have that. It has the Embrace Diversity. It has a whole thing about what to donate, like how to prepare for a seed swap. So if you've never gone to a seed swap, it tells you these are the things you might want to do ahead of time to get yourself ready for the seed swap. This is kind of some of the etiquette at the seed swap about how do you interact with the seeds and the people that grew them. And then also if you're planning on bringing seeds to the seed swap, what are some kind of things to note about what, would be great to put out, and maybe what are some things that are maybe more questionable, or like maybe you just need to label it diverse, or this don't share it at all. So for example, carrots is one of those other ones that I'm kind of like really probably don't tend to accept from just random growers, because carrots have a very small genetic profile. And if you save it from like just one carrot and it just or maybe just like a very small population, I would say it can express breeding inbreeding depression, and it can revert to its wild relative, which is Queen Anne's lace. Or if you have a lot of Queen Anne's lace where you live and people are sharing carrot seed, it could have crossed with the wild relative. It's not going to be poison. This is just going to be a woody, inedible plant. So that's kind of a lot of time, to grow. And then you're kind of sad because it's not very tasty. So those are just some things that we include in the seed swap resources, which I really love. And then I also want to just put out the shout out. Oh my gosh, if you pack, or even if you just put everything in labels, I cannot say enough about the auto wrapper. So once again, here's that auto wrapper. If you go to the envelopes and label page and you want to make your life so much easier, I mean, whether you're buying seeds and you buy the same stuff over and over again, just like having a label that you can just print out and just, whether you use Avery labels and self-stick them, or you just print them out on paper like we do, and we just staple them to the envelope packet or put them in the jar. It is such a game changer in terms of in terms of time. And then also you have all the planting instructions for people, and then the seed saving instructions, and the people are going to see those seed saving instructions year after year. That I'm hoping that it's going to increase the return rates for a lot of seed libraries. Any other last question before we?
Yes. Let's see. Can you ballpark a percentage of resulting fruit that's tasty versus not so much?
What, say that again? Can you?
It says folks locally are somewhat resistant to adaptation growing. Can you ballpark a percentage of resulting fruits that's tasty versus not so tasty?
You know, we haven't, it's very interesting. Julia Dakin would be a much better person to answer the question around resistance to adaptation garden, but she was going around to different, um, different places, different communities and farmers markets and asking people and just like sharing this. And she said that, like in terms of the resistance, they were getting like 2% people were like, oh no, I want something very specific. I'm not interested in something a little bit more genetically diverse. In terms of I don't know if the question is more about like the quality of the food that comes out. I mean, we haven't really, I think for a lot, it's very interesting because I know that when I first started, it was very much I want this particular thing and I'm growing this. But now I've really opened up and been more like I'm just more interested in having a squash. And sometimes I definitely grow, a specific like I like my costata romanesco squash and I definitely grow that. But I'm also open to like, oh, that one's totally great, or that one's a new favorite, although I might not get it next year in my mix. So I think that a lot of people aren't as concerned about if you want something very specific, like I need to do canning, then you might want to start with something very specific for that purpose. But if you're just like, I want a tomato, then I think a lot of people are more in that I just want a tomato and something to eat. So they're a little bit more open to the adaptation garden. But if you're looking for a specific need, then you might be sticking with an old favorite. Yeah. Great. Awesome. Well, such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. We truly appreciate your time and everything that you shared. Um, and yes, we'll have the recording and the slides out to everyone that registered, so you can reference everything afterwards. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to the next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody,
Take
for joining us.